Hello once again, my friends. I'd like to welcome you to another video for fellow lovers of all things historic and interesting. I got another little model to show you guys today. Now, I recently did a video doing the history of the Morro Castle for you guys. It's a real tragic and real sad story of that ship. She really didn't she didn't deserve what she got. She was barely 4 years old when her life came to an end under horrible circumstances. There was a fire set deliberately, and she burned like an inferno and came to rest and smoldered. And in the end, she was taken away, and she actually ended up sinking while being taken away to be scrapped. So anyway, we have a model of the Morro Castle that I want to show you guys. He's not easy to find. I've been looking everywhere for the model of the Morro Castle, and that brings me to what I had wanted to tell you guys. I'm actually going to do a little project. I can't find a model of the Morro Castle, so what I think I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make one myself. I'm thinking of using cardboard, and we'll see how that goes. I'm looking for the blueprints, or copies of the blueprints for the ship, so I can have a gauge on what to go by, because the pictures they're black and white. They're not the highest quality, and I can't find any photo pictures of the ship. But anyway, that's another video and that's another project. What I want to show you guys today is actually by Albatros-Models, and this is number 161, which is the Morro Castle, 1930 Ward Line, USA. Of course, the Ward Line was, let me see if I remember, the New York and Cuban, or New York and Cuba Steamship Mail Company. And the Ward Line would go between New York and Havana, Cuba. And what made these ships popular was, at the time, it was prohibition. And alcohol, of course, was prohibited in the United States. But once you got 3.5 miles offshore, you were in international waters, and then they could sell and consume alcohol. But this ship had all kinds of just nightmarish things happen to it. On the way back, the captain passed away. They were in a hurricane force storm. Arson set the ship on fire. Half the crew ended up just abandoning the ship and leaving the passengers to be on their own. It's just everything that could go wrong with this ship went wrong. You can see again, this is in 1/1250 scale. Now, I showed you a ship before in this little 1/1250 scale, and I think that was actually the SS France. So we have that, and this is actually the only second 1/1200 scale model that I've ever gotten. And let's see, what is Albatros? So that looks like the original tape for the ceiling. And the only real writing on the box is, oh, there's something on the side. Let's see. Morro Castle, Albatros model, 56. And what is that? 161? I don't know why it says that. The top says, oh yeah, 161, okay. I'm not sure what that 56 is. But you can see, at one time it was sealed, but it's since been opened. And of course I opened it just to make sure that it wasn't broken. So let's take it over to the desk where there's more room and more light, where I can show you guys more detail on this pretty cool little ship. Well, not really little, she was 508 feet long. Okay, so let's take a look at this model. Again, a little bit better lighting. You can see Albatros model. You can see there's two L's in model. I don't know where this is coming from. NR61, 161, excuse me, Morro Castle, 1930 Ward Line, USA. Albatros Models, and that is 161. 56. Okay. What I have as a backdrop is I have a book that I have shown you on the Morro Castle. This is from Thomas Gallagher, and this is called Fire at Sea, the story of the Morro Castle. And what I fell in love with, or what makes this book so special to me, as you can see on the inside, it was signed by Thomas Gallagher himself in October of 1959. To Mrs. J.E. Pierce, with appreciation, Thomas Gallagher. So I like the fact that this has been signed personally by Mr. Gallagher himself. All right, we'll take a look at the pictures in that later. Well, let's take a look at the model. So, very simple, the boxing. And when you open it up, you have the little pieces of styrofoam that go on the inside. And the way the box is set up, it's actually set up for the sides to all come down and reveal the model. And we've got the two pieces of styrofoam that go on either side, and the two that are taped into place. But these, let me show you guys, these are for the smokestacks to protect the model during shipping. You can see it goes over just like that. So let's go ahead and show you guys the model. Now this model is actually glued to the bottom of the package of the box. I don't know if it was originally that way or if somebody decided to glue it, but right now this model is glued to the side of the to the bottom of the box. You can see the front, the foremast, and you can see what I think of the cranes, and check out the ear vents. And I think what I'll do with this is, to give you a better look, we'll take you off of the tripod. Let's take you off the tripod. All right, now we can actually zoom in and show you this pretty cool little model. A lot of detail in this little guy. I'll show you the starboard side. You can see the vents on top. You can see the wheelhouse and the bridge with the little area on top. You can see the lifeboats. They had 6 lifeboats. I like those stripes around the smoke funnels or the smokestacks. You can see the boat decks up top, and you can see the more vents. Moving over to the aft mast, and you can see the end, the poop deck or the stern, and I think that could be the docking platform. It's on top, along with more of the vents. What was nice about this is there was multiple stories. I think total there was 3. You could be on 3 different stories, so if there was too many people on one of the poop decks, you could go to a different level where you can look to see and get the same view of the back of the ship as she went through the ocean on her way to Cuba. You can see the bottom looking in on the promenade deck. All the way to the front, you can see the green for starboard, and we've got 2 of the cargo hatches. You can see the anchor chains right there, and this has the bottom of the model red. Wow, looks like a hair. Okay, that's the thing with high definition, you do see everything. All right, let's go ahead. I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to try to show you, let's show you the front first. And again, I'll zoom in. We get the bow section. Again, you can see the forecastle, and you got all the vents. Please excuse my unsteady hand. And you've got going up to the bridge, the wheelhouse. And you can see we'll do a flyover of the ship over the smokestacks. decks all the way to the stern. Very nice. It's all right. Now let me turn it around to show you guys the port side, and hopefully I'll be able to zoom in. Yeah, I should be able to. So we'll show you guys the port side, and I'll hold the box down so the little styrofoam pieces aren't in the way. I don't really want to pry it off the box. You can see the boat deck, promenade deck, the lifeboats, all the way back to the stern. Again, very, very beautiful ship, and she did not get what she ended up getting done to her. You can see that's just a nightmare. Imagine going for a stroll late night or early morning and seeing a hulk of a ship, an ocean liner, totally ablaze, with screams and all kinds of things that comes to rest right in front of you on the beach. That's what happened on September 8th. It was just a nightmare. So I think what I want to do now is I'll put you back on a tripod and I'll show you some of the pictures. Excuse my hand, we'll have to edit this out. Again, I'll show you the I'd love to get a kit of this. Very hard to find, especially with the history like this. Not too many. When you compare it to the Titanic, there's very, very few people, even people that aren't into history, or ask anyone on the street and you ask them about the Titanic and they have at least heard of it. This, I'm not making light of the Titanic because that was horrible. They went down in the freezing water and loss of life. There was more lives lost on the Titanic than the MORRO Castle. But can you think of any more of a nightmare scenario? The middle of the night, all of a sudden the boat is on fire, the flames are just fanned all over the place, and before you know it, you're in an inferno. You couldn't even stand on the deck because of the melting of your shoes. And then, oh, by the way, you watch the crew get into the lifeboats and leave. That's just got to be horrible. I've been taking notes, and I'm not so much interested in the investigations afterwards, but it's more about the ship herself. But I want to show you some of the pictures that are in here. It's a nice picture, the MORRO Castle, before the fire, obviously. And then we have the great pleasure ship on fire. At the bottom, passengers hang on from ropes as they wait for rescuers. And this is just, that's just a nightmare. Look, you can see the little arrows pointing to the passengers waiting to be rescued. The ones that jumped off the ship, there were 67 of them that were actually saved from a fisherman. And his fishing vessel, the Paramount, did save 67 people. And something very reminiscent of the Carpathia photograph of the lifeboats from the Titanic. You can see the lifeboats from the MORRO Castle. And a lot of them had crew members on it. So, top, survivors as they approached the Monarch of Bermuda. And this photograph, residents of Spring Lake, New Jersey greet the first lifeboat to reach shore. And the residents were wondering why there were so many crew members. A lot of the crew members were actually so ashamed that they were ripping off the insignias off their uniforms. A survivor, 2 weeks from exposure and submersion, is removed from a fishing boat, and that would be the Paramount. And the bottom photo, the firehouse at Spring Lake was quickly converted into a hospital. And look at that horrible scenario. And again, when people had realized that most of the crew were in the lifeboats, when they seen the ship, they can see several lifeboats charred, still clinging to the davits. A boat deck with an unlaunched lifeboat. And look at that, man. One of the enclosed decks after the fire is still, I've looked at this photo and just been haunted by it, and the intense heat needed to generate that is just unbelievable, really. A lifeboat that never got lowered. The scarred liner beached at Ashbury Park. Salvagers tried to free the charred hulk, the MORRO Castle, 3 months after the disaster. So she was there a while, and they actually thought about keeping the ship there as a tourist attraction because there was traffic jams and there was just all kinds of people going to see it. They ended up against it because all the food and the cargo that was on the ship began to decompose, and it was really a rancid smell. But all these people were informed by, there was a radio station actually that was broadcasting from the hull, and that informed a lot of people. A close-up of the beached vessel with crowds of sightseers. That's not something you see every day. What remained of the castle's superstructure, complete with unlaunched lifeboats. Very scary pictures, very haunting. And this creep. They never had anything on him. Chief Radio Operator George W. Rogers gives his testimony during the federal inquiry in New York. Rogers in 1938 and 1953 after the Hummel murders. This guy was just a real miserable creep. And they never had anything on him. They couldn't prove anything. But he didn't even send, as the radio operator, it was up to him to send the SOS as soon as the fire was discovered. And he never even bothered until 38 minutes after the fire was discovered. And they didn't do background checks. They outsourced the radio operators. Kind of like White Star Line did with the Titanic. And they didn't do the background checks. If they'd have done a background check on this clown, they would have realized that he had a record of arson and assault. And nobody liked him. Matter of fact, he was informed that once the ship had gotten back to New York, to the home port, he was going to be freed of his duties. But not a very likable guy. But they never got anything to stick. And what's other interesting at this is they have the in the back they actually have the passenger list, and I don't know if they have the survivors. They got the crew list as well, and look at the name right on top. Eben Scott Abbott was the chief engineer. When the captain died, the first officer, Officer Warnes, took over as captain. And he made Abbott the first officer. He was the chief engineer. Shortly after making him the first officer, Warnes was on the bridge trying to navigate the ship through the hurricane. And Abbott was seen leaving and abandoning the ship in one of the lifeboats with, I think there was a total of 8 people that left. But funny how his name is first. I wouldn't, that's just, is that the legacy you want to be left with as a coward? After the engines had stopped running, the crews from the engine room also got into lifeboats and left the ship. when you guys think about the gallantry of the Titanic, with the ladies and children first, and the gentlemen standing aside to let them go, and then you look at this, and it's like real, not real gallant. This has the official total dead at 134, the official count, but they actually never found all the bodies. And I've been taking notes as I've been going along. I'm just about halfway through the book, just about when the fire is really spreading and is starting to, the ship's life is coming to an end. So, I know my notes are really messy. What I want to do eventually is I want to make a timeline. So this is the SS Morro Castle, the ward line. The captain was Robert Wilmot, and he was 31 years with the ward line. The second officer at the time was Ivan Freeman, and the chief officer was William F. Warnes. Chief radio operator was George W. Rogers, that creep. And the second radio operator, his name was Algana. And the book has references George Rogers as a psychopath with a criminal record, 20 years long. According to psych records, he was a sociopathic personality. He attempts to manipulate his environment, and it says defrauded chief radio operator Stanley Ferguson. Defrauded him out of a job. Again, he was swindling. That's just the kind of guy he is. And more on Rogers. The job complaints from Captain Wilmot. Rang bridge with 2 bells, captain's signal, telling Freeman not to use the radio compass so much, stop turning the music in on it, had gone on strike with passengers boarding. He and other junior officer delayed the boat 2 hours. The captain instructed Rogers to keep key to the emergency room hidden from Algana. Didn't trust him. These are just notes that I scribbled down that I want to actually go back and make a timeline for. Captain Wilmot fears and distrusts grow to where the passengers take notice of it. So the captain was getting paranoid. There was a reason he was getting paranoid. To a passenger he became friendly with, told him that he was going to fire Rogers as soon as they returned to port. They thought Rogers was a danger to the ship and the passengers. And 2 bottles brought aboard in Cuba, 1 of sulfuric acid and 1 foul-smelling liquid that they weren't able to identify. Rogers told the captain just 1 he took from Algana. Captain feared for his personal safety, and it ended up, oh, by the way, the captain ended up dying of a heart attack. One of the drunk sailors that came over from the steamship SS President Wilson said to get even, throw a stench bomb. Delays and money lost. They were looking to get even with the company. Worried for his safety as well as an impending hurricane, Captain Wilmot had passengers in his cabin in the afternoon, but declined to attend dinner, instead having a tray sent to his cabin. The reason was unforeseen circumstances. The same waiter who always served him the food brought it up to him, and after eating a tropical melon from Cuba, he collapsed holding his stomach. He first told Officer Warnes that he would be all right and to get back to the bridge. However, an hour later, 4th Officer Hansen found the captain partly undressed in his bathtub. Dr. Van Zyl had declared the captain dead, and he's been dead for quite some time. First Officer Warnes assumes command, sends a radiogram. Wilmot deceased, 7:45 p.m. Acknowledge, Warnes. That was the official message. Warnes' ability to captain the ship was questioned by fellow officers, even the captain's wife. Mrs. Wilmot said the captain thought he was too erratic and didn't know what he was doing. Later, this radiogram would be sent by the purser, Robert Tolman, and here's the message. Confirming message from Warnes, stop. Wilmot deceased, acute indigestion and heart attack, 7:45 this evening, stop. All papers for entry in order. Tolman, purser. So there's already turmoil that's starting on the ship. The captain's death was announced at the captain's ball, and it was then said that no more music would be played in the public rooms for the duration of the voyage in respect to the captain. And again, they said that he had died of indigestion. Despite the captain's fearing for his personal safety and the locking of his door, the food on a tray brought to him, his drinking water, and his medications were never analyzed. There was also never an autopsy done on his body. The death of the captain had First Officer Warnes assume command. Second Officer Ivan Freeman promoted to First Officer. Third Officer Clarence Hackney promoted to Second Officer. Fourth Officer Howard Hansen was promoted to Third Officer, and all the men held licenses for master of vessels of unlimited tonnage. At 2:50 a.m. ship's time, the smell of smoke was noted. Passenger James A. Flynn had discovered a small fire in the writing room at 2:10 a.m. on B deck. Night watchman Forsh reported to the acting captain Warnes that smoke was detected through a small ventilator on the port side and at the end of the fiddly near the number 1 stack. The fire was discovered in a locker that was only accessible by crew members in a writing room, and that was hid behind the bookshelves. The crew was awakened and told to get to the fire stations. The boatswain was very drunk, and as a result, the men had no foreman to direct them. And the former first mate Warnes, then now acting captain, had to remain on the bridge. See, a lot of these people may be drunk, but you may think that it's just like chaos everywhere, but this was the last night returning to New York. So this was kind of like a party atmosphere where the passengers had to go back to reality coming from their vacation. So this was like the last hurrah, because there was still prohibition in America. So when they got to port, there was no alcohol. Warnes had sent Freeman down to take charge of fighting the fire. Warnes decided to hold course directly into the wind instead of turning to the beach. And again, he was facing right into a hurricane, and all it did was fan the flames, and the fire spread that much more quickly. The Derby automated fire detecting system aboard ship was not installed in public places, such as the writing room, so the bridge saw no indications of the fire. Chief Engineer Abbott, once woken up by the fire alarm, chose to dress in full white uniform as opposed to work clothes that procedure dictated. Abbott would later tell 3 frightened passengers to head up to the boat deck, but did not escort them. The engine room, though he had was not on fire at the time, was filling with smoke, causing the alarm. Abbott sent First Engineer Anthony Bouja back down to the engine room as he went to the bridge to inform the acting captain Warnes of the situation. He gave orders: keep the men below. Do not leave unless they have to. If you have to leave, turn off the turbines, shut off the fuel system to the boilers, and leave the steam fire pump running. But they actually ended up abandoning ship. Well, the whole crew in the engine room just went to the lifeboats, lowered them, and rowed away. Fire doors were not closed, neither were the vents in the writing room. See, that again, it just seemed like total chaos, and nobody knew what they were doing. Watchmen claimed to have no knowledge of the fire alarm, or the safety of the fire alarm, or what to do at his station. It's not really good to know. The MORRO Castle did not run fire drills regularly, and when they did, only part of the crew took part. Now, there might be a reason for that. They were doing a fire drill one time, and the water actually spilled onto the deck from one of the hydrants, and the deck got slippery. As a result, a woman fell. She injured her ankle, and she actually sued. And she won $25,000 from the ward line. That's a lot now. Can you imagine what it was back in 1934? So that's an astronomical amount of money. Let's see, did I write that down? The prior month, the ship owners were Sued for $25,000 by a woman who fell and hurt herself in a wet, leaky floor station. Okay, I had told you that. As a result, Captain Wilmot gave orders to leave the hoses and cap off the stations. Not a good idea. The spanner wrenches were also removed to prevent tampering during fire drills that may cause leaks. The fire stations near the writing room were out of order, so hoses had to be brought in from the top deck, double length. That's never a good thing. As the flames grew, the smoke spread, the chaos increased, the deck chairs were thrown overboard, and the passengers began to notice the impending fire. In the wheelhouse, the fire indicator was showing red fire from A deck all the way down to C deck. That's never a good thing to see on a screen. The general alarm would then be sounded. The ship was ordered left wheel to turn towards the shoreline at 3 a.m. in an attempt to prevent the wind from fanning the fire, but by that point, it had already really spread quite a bit. Captain Wilmot had the ship's smoke detector system turned off when they left Cuba. This was an attempt to prevent bad odors from reaching passengers from the cargo holds, because what they did was they had taken salted leather hides on as cargo for the return trip. And the way the smoke detectors were, there was an air system through the entire ship, the ventilation, and it was monitored. The odor from the cargo hold was going through to the passenger cabins, and they were complaining, so the captain decided to turn it off. Another not a good move. The ship's Lyle gun was located just above the writing room. The powder the gun used was put into a pretzel can, placed with the gun left under in a large canvas. Fire organized from the locker in the writing room. It was so hot, the spread so fast that it was thought to be a chemical fire at first, and everybody knew it was set deliberately. Suspicion of a black tom explosion was used to start the fire. Pen or small device, which has two chambers containing chemicals separated by a thin copper film. Acid eats through the copper to join the chemicals, producing enough heat to start a fire. And the chemicals would be potassium citrate, table sugar, and sulfuric acid. Information on this device came from George Rogers himself. Who else? George Rogers was present at several occasions on locations of the fire of a suspicious nature. Fires before the Morro Castle incident, as well as after, none of which could be proven. I'd like for them to do an investigation now with the DNA and everything that they have, where they could really nail that joker. And that's what I have up until this point in the book. This is when the chaos is really starting to mount, and the ship is almost fully engulfed in the flames. There's turmoil, there's chaos, passengers are starting to panic, and they see the crew members leave with the lifeboats. The decks where they are going to the top, the passengers are so hot, their shoes are catching fire, they've got no choice but to jump over. They do see the shoreline, they see the lights in the distance, and they have the hope that they can reach the shoreline, so they jump over and they start swimming. Many of them die from exposure and exhaustion. There were 67 that were saved by the local fisherman and his vessel, the Paramount. And it's just a really sad situation with this whole ship. The situation, or this is like the perfect example of what not to do when you're running a cruise ship or a passenger ship. But that is the story of the Morro Castle, and I was actually able to find you guys a little model. And I might be doing a project where I haven't been able to find a model per se, a model kit of the Morro Castle, so I was thinking of actually making one, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I really wanted to share the history of her with you guys because, like I said, she was a grand lady. She was 508 feet long, and she really deserved much better than what she got, especially when she met her end. But I guess I've rambled enough, guys. But I thought it was important to share the history of this beautiful lady with you guys. And I hope you enjoyed the video, a little bit of history. So until my next video, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.